Well, good evening, everyone, and Merry Christmas to you, and specifically a Merry Christmas Eve. And thank you for being here with us. You know, as we approach Christmas and we come to this day specifically of Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day, I'm very much aware of the fact that there's a lot of emotions that go with it. For some of you, you've got family around you, your house is full, you're trying to figure out how to corral everyone together to watch this video and this Christmas Eve service. So there's a lot of things going on. It's a very exciting time with family coming in and friends being around. For others of you, you're by yourself. It's a very quiet room, and perhaps you've not been looking forward to this night and to Christmas, and so you're struggling with things. Regardless of where you find yourself at in this moment, my hope would be that this time together would be an encouragement to you, would offer you hope, and would really pause whatever you're going through in the moment and have a great reflection as what Christmas means and this incredible gift that we have been given through Jesus Christ. So very sincerely, I'm so glad to spend these couple of minutes with you. You know, I've said this through the years of many, many Christmas Eve services, but it still remains to be true that on this past Tuesday night, the 21st of December, it was the Winter Solstice. Of course, Winter Solstice is the shortest day and the longest night of the year. And of course, that's what the scientists tell us. That's according to scientific research. But any child will tell you that the scientists are wrong. Any child will tell you that the longest night of the year is tonight. Christmas Eve is by far the longest and hardest night of the year for them. And so with that in mind, very sincerely, thank you for giving us this time, your time, and for joining us in this service. Now, I'm going to share a couple of devotional thoughts with you, and then we're going to end the service actually joining in live with the candle lighting and the singing of Silent Night that will be happening here in our auditorium. So I just give you that heads up. Maybe you want to get a candle ready. Maybe you want to have a candle and have your own candle lighting while you're there, or perhaps you just want to turn the lights off and just look at the screen and watch what's happening before you. But that's how we're going to end, so you can be prepared and be ready for that. I'll give you a story as we start. One summer night, not too long ago, I was leaving the office heading home. It was about 6 o'clock at night. I had driven into the neighborhood next to ours. That was the quickest cut through to get to my house. And as I was driving, all of a sudden, I hit a bump. So there was a bump underneath the car, and I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but clearly there was the sound under my car that I had either hit something or lost something, but I know there wasn't anything in the road. It sounded like something maybe had fallen off and it kind of banged its way to the back of the car. So again, my thought was, I clearly there was nothing in the road, so I couldn't have hit something, so surely something must have fallen off my car. So I looked at my mirror immediately, and sure enough, as I looked in my mirror behind me, there lying in the road was something, all right, but it was not my muffler and it was not my transmission. Actually, it was a dog. It was a cockapoo puppy, brown cocker spaniel, half cocker spaniel and half poodle. She was brown, she was absolutely adorable, and she was in trouble, for I had hit her with my car. I went back, of course, I stopped my car, I got out, and as I went down and looked at her and began to touch her and pet her, she's clearly in shock, she's clearly in pain, and she's not doing well. On top of all of this, a young woman is running down the driveway, running out to the dog, screaming and crying because apparently I'd hit her dog. Now, I found out shortly after that she was actually dog sitting. She was very young, just graduated from high school weeks before. She was house sitting for this family who were out of the country for 2 weeks, and this was actually just her second day watching the dog. And she's running out crying, and I'm saying, I am so sorry, I am so sorry. I never saw her, I just never saw her. I don't even know how I could hit her. She immediately said, it's not your fault, it's not your fault. She said, the dog just runs. She actually ran out and she hit the side of your car, and she ran underneath the side of your car. And she said the dog's name is Phoebe. Well, Phoebe wasn't in good shape, so I sent the young girl back into the house. I said, go get some blankets, go get some towels. And she had no one with her. Her parents are in Newport. She was from Newport. She's all alone. So I told her to get some towels and blankets. She came back. I told her to sit in the front seat of my car, and I put the towels and blankets on her lap. I then went back and I gathered up Phoebe very carefully as she's in pain, and then took Phoebe up and laid Phoebe in her lap. And off we went to go to the animal hospital. She's by herself, and so I thought, well, I'm not going to leave this poor young girl by herself. So I sat there all night with her as we sat in that waiting room and just talking things through and trying to figure out what to do next. And I was with her when the nurse came out and the veterinarian came out and sat down with her and said, we are so sorry, but there's nothing else we can do for Phoebe. She was crushed. I gave her my phone and I told her to call her parents. Her parents were going to come down from Newport. And then we got in the car and I drove her back to her home. And I asked her some questions. I said, was Phoebe chasing something? Was she running to see someone? I said, it just didn't make any sense. And she said this statement. She said, no. She said, the problem with Phoebe is Phoebe just runs. I couldn't get the leash on her quick enough, and Phoebe just runs. She just takes off with her head down with no thought, and she just runs. And then there's a long pause as we were driving. And then after that pause, she said these words. She said, I guess if you're going to just run, it's only a matter of time until you run into something. I sat there thinking, how profound and how true. I sat there thinking, days afterwards, I have thought about that a lot. And in fact, I've seen it a lot and I've done it. So have you. Times when we just put our head down and we just run. We don't think about anything. We are people who are runners. Maybe not always, but often in our lives, we're running to or from something. And sooner or later, if you're going to run, she's right, you're going to run into something. Sooner or later, there's going to be a collision. Now, I'm not talking about literally running. I'm not talking about Forrest Gump running. I was running. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the other kind of running that we do. I mean, quite honestly, we're at Christmas time. Some of you have been running all day today. You've been running for days. You've had things you've had to get done. People are coming, companies coming. I got to buy that present. I got to wrap that present. I got to fix that meal. And you've just been a dead run. But this is not just a Christmas thing. If you look at our lives, we are runners. We run from one relationship to another. We run from one relationship or to another relationship. We can't run our lives very well, so then we seek to run other people's lives. We run to be successful. We run to be loved. We run to be recognized. I mean, if you're honest about it, oftentimes in our lives, we just run. We run after a job. We run after a career. We run after success. Right? We run after things, the next TV, whatever it might be. We are runners. And so let's be honest. Often in our lives, we just run. No real thought to some really critical issues. No real thought to spiritual things. No real thought to the question of, well, why am I here? And where am I going? And what's my purpose? And where does this thing all end? And is there more to what I'm just running after? We just run. And usually, if we're normal, like most of us are, we run until something stops us. We run until we collide into something. Something hit us, some event happens which jars us, which stops us. The collision takes place, and then we're forced to stop and look and say, man, what was that about? So I want to stop this Christmas Eve, and I want to explore together tonight for just a couple of minutes. I want to talk about the great Christmas collision. I want to talk about this idea, and have you ever thought about that the Christmas story is really about God colliding in our world, colliding with us, coming into our world so that when we run, and we're going to run into something sooner or later, He collides in our world so that we would run into Him. The Christmas story is actually a number of miracles, full of miracles. But I want to highlight for a couple of moments 4 key miracles where we collide with God. God collides with us. I want to talk about the miracle itself, and then I want to talk about why that miracle is problematic for us. Now, the first Christmas miracle is the miracle of God invading our world. God actually coming into our world. About 2,021 years ago, God invaded Earth. Now, I got to tell you, when a person walked on the moon for the first time, that was a big deal. I remember it well as a kid. A day is coming when someone's going to walk on Mars. That's going to be a big deal. But I want to remind you that it was a bigger deal. It was the biggest deal ever when God actually walked on earth with us. This is the first miracle of Christmas, that God came to earth. Some of you say, well, now wait a minute. You're talking about God. I thought we were talking about Jesus. Well, remember, Jesus is God. And the Bible tells us that Jesus is the invisible image of God. God himself, through his Son, came to earth. And this is the most historic, most significant historic event in all of history. Then that's why we celebrate. Do you realize that all through history and all time as we know it, right up until the present, everything in our timeline, everything in our calendars has been defined, has been marked by the time when Jesus Christ came into this world and when God invaded our world? You see, when we write checks, when we look at our calendars, when we look at a date, we're always looking and looking at time that's been split into two sections. We have BC and AD. We have before Christ, and then we have the year of our Lord, which is what AD actually means. Now, some time ago, of course, a group of people came along and said, well, we don't like this proclamation of time being about Jesus. So they came up with a new term called the Common Era. But still we recognize that time has been divided before Christ came into this world and after Jesus Christ came into this world. Think about that. Every time you look at a calendar, you once again are referencing the coming of God into this earth, that collision where God invades our earth. How does that miracle collide with our world? Well, the collision is this. A lot of us would prefer to have God stay out there somewhere. A lot of us would prefer to have God stay up there somewhere. We kind of like God at a distance. We kind of like him removed. We kind of like to see God out there if we need him, when we want him. But we really don't like the idea oftentimes of God right here with us. We'd rather have him be a little removed from the story. So that's the first miracle, that Jesus Christ comes to earth. Let me give you the second miracle that collides in our world. The second miracle is how he came. You see, the Bible tells us that he came as a human being. The Bible says that he became like one of us. The Bible in Philippians says this: Jesus gave up his place as God and he made himself one of us. Now think of all the ways that God could have come into the world. If I'm God, if you elect me God for a day, and I'm going to make my entrance into the world, think of all the ways that I could do it. I mean, I could write my name in the clouds, in the sky for the whole world to see. I could send a thunder and lightning storm, a firestorm that nobody would miss as the introduction to me coming into the world. I could put on a light show with the northern lights, the lights that no one's ever seen before. I mean, all sorts of things. I could go ahead, if I were God back then, he could have created flat TVs well ahead of time, put one in every village, every hut, every house, every igloo, lit them up as the introduction to Jesus Christ coming into this world. Instead, how does he do it? He comes into our world as a baby. Why is that? I'll give you two thoughts. One, if you're going to be one of us, then you need to come into this world the same way that every one of us has. And we've come into this world as a baby. I think the second reason why he came as a baby, quite honestly, because no one's afraid of a baby. We got to get this truth. God came to save us, not scare us. He came to save you, not to scare you. And no one's afraid of a baby. Well, with the exception of newborn parents. When they're holding a newborn, there's always this fright, but they tend to get over it about the fifth diaper change. They're usually over the fear, and they're kind of moving on to other things. But no one's afraid of a baby. If he had come in some grand entrance with thunder and lightning and fire, we'd be scared to death. We'd want nothing to do with God. But God wants you to know him. And so he becomes like one of us. And think about it. He's born like us. He has a family like us. He grows up in the same issues that we had. He had to grow up the same way we have to grow up. He had to grow up spiritually. He had to grow up physically. He had to grow up socially. He's tempted like us. He had problems like us. He has needs like us. He was treated badly by his friends like us. He was even abandoned by his friends like some of us. He becomes like us so that we could relate to him as someone who knows us and someone who we can know. So you say, what's the problem with that? Well, here's the problem. We kind of like the Wizard of Oz picture of God. If we're honest at times, we would kind of like God to be more like the Wizard of Oz type. We wanted him to be the one who communicates with fire and smoke and thunder and the floating big head. And you say, well, why would we want that? Because quite honestly, it's easier to write off that kind of God. It's far easier to write off the God who scares us. Because what kind of God scares people? It's easier to discredit him. It's easier to look at him as being unreasonable, and we really don't have to pay attention to him. That kind of Wizard of Oz type God with all the lights and all the sound, it's really easy for us to say, well, he doesn't understand me. He doesn't relate to me. He can't understand what I'm going through. Well, he came to earth. He left heaven to be with us, and he came to be like us, and so he comes as a baby. Let me give you the third miracle that collides in our world. He came to ordinary people. I want you to catch this next statement. Jesus came to the ordinary people, not the extraordinary people, not the extraordinary. He came to the ordinary. He didn't come to a select few. He didn't come to the privileged to upper class. He didn't come for the religious people. He came for the people who could care less about spiritual things. He came to the people who could care less about God. He came to the people, and many times the picture we see, he came to the lowest people, not to the people that were the highest up. Ordinary working parents, born in a barn. And think about this. Who are the people on the invite list, the first invite list, to come and to actually see the baby? They weren't royalty. There were no heads of state. There were no religious leaders, no big stars, no big names. There was only one group on the list, right? And it was the shepherds. And the truth of it is, and I've done this, so have you, we have somewhat conveniently and purposefully kind of sentimentalized the Christmas story. We've kind of sterilized the story. Our mangers are sterile and clean. There's no urine smell. There's no manure. Our shepherds are quaint and quiet souls. They're nothing like, instead of being smelly outcasts that they really were. People couldn't stand to be around the shepherds. They were odd. They were weird. They smelled. They were out in the fields, months and months at a time. They couldn't stand to be around them. We've kind of sterilized the picture that they look kind of nice and they look kind of quaint. Now later, the Bible does tell us, some wise men came, three kings of great wealth and great stature. And all that does is remind us is that when Jesus came, he didn't come in a gated community. He came for everyone. He came for all. But the first that were invited were those shepherds. So here's the problem. Here's where the collision takes place. At times, we kind of wish that God was an aristocrat. We kind of wish that God was like those that are super rich and super privileged. It's easier to ignore them. It's easier to be mad at a God who looks like he has everything that I don't have, and to write him off because he has all these things, all these riches, and look what I need. It's easier to look at him and say, I want nothing to do with that God. But he came to the ordinary. He came to us. A couple weeks ago, we were at the mall. Now, listen, this is a record because we actually went to the mall 3 times in one day. Now, that's a record for me, and that's not a good record. That's a bad record. But I'm sitting in the mall, and I'm eating my Auntie Anne's pretzels. And my favorite things, I'm sitting down, Diane's doing shopping, I'm eating my pretzels, dipping them in my cheese sauce, and I'm just watching people go by. And I've said this to Diane so many times, we really are all of us, we really are just ordinary people, including me. We're all just ordinary people looking for a moment to be extraordinary. When we pick out our clothes, when we look at the mirror, we're picking out our clothes to try to take the ordinary and make ourselves look extraordinary. But the greatest miracle of Christmas is not that he came simply for the ordinary. The greatest miracle of Christmas, this last one I'll talk about, is why he came. And friends, I need you to hear this. He came for your benefit. He came for my benefit. Listen to these words of Jesus from John 18. I was born for the purpose to bring truth to the world. John chapter 10, I came to give you life and to give you a rich and full life. John chapter 12, I came to save the world, not to judge the world. When we talk about bringing to us truth, we're talking about the fact that we really need truth in a world that's full of fake truth, fake news, if you will. As far as life, that's what we're all looking for. We're looking for this full life. Not an empty one, but a full life, full of joy, a full life in a dying world. Forgiveness. We're looking for forgiveness in a very unforgiving world. 3 of God's greatest gifts to us. He gives us truth. He gives us life. He gives us forgiveness. He came for your benefit. But here's the rub. It'd be far easier for us to write God off if he had come for his benefit. If you could sit down and say, hey, what does God gain by coming into this world? I can tell you right now, you look at it and you find that he gains absolutely nothing. It was always about our benefit. He came to make your life richer, not to make his life richer. He came to make my life fuller, not to make his life fuller. Have you ever had one of those quiet moments? I mean, those quiet moments alone. Maybe you've taken a walk in the woods. I've said this through the years, holding grandchildren, holding a brand new grandbaby. I'm holding a baby in a quiet moment, and I'm having these moments of reflection. For you, it's a quiet night. You're getting ready to go to sleep. You're laying in bed. Everything's quiet. Everything's dark, but you're not asleep yet. And do you ever have those moments where some of those questions pop up? Those questions that say, why am I here? What really is the purpose of all of this? Is there something more to what I'm doing already? Is this really what it's about? I get up, I go work, I get my money, I save to retire, I live a little, have some fun, and then die. I mean, is that really all that there is? Is there really a God? Ever ask yourself that question? Do you ever have a moment where you feel like in your ear, you can almost hear someone saying, I wonder if there's a God. Is he real? And I would say to you, absolutely yes. Yes, there is a God. His name is Jesus. One of the names in the Bible, it says, his name is Emmanuel, which means God with us. Truth is, friends, we desperately need there to be a God who cares enough about you to leave his world and to come into your world. A God who is one of us, who understands our lives. And a God who gets the things that scare you. He understands the things that frighten you. He understands the things that overwhelms you. And to all of those things, he says to you, just give them to me. A God who has your best interest and your well-being at heart all of the time without fail. That's the God we celebrate tonight. That's the God we celebrate on Christmas Eve 2021. Jesus came so that people who run, and that's us, we're runners, so that people who run could run into him. If you're going to run, there's going to be a collision. And God's hope and plan all along would be that you would collide with him, you would run into him, and when you do that, you would discover one of the greatest relationships that you could ever know or ever imagine. Oh, by the way, I should tell you, not too long ago, I was driving home again, and I saw Phoebe. She was walking along the sidewalk. Admittedly, Phoebe has a little bit of a limp that she didn't have before because of a broken hip. I stopped to pet her and look at her, and she's missing some teeth. She's deathly afraid of big white cars, but Phoebe had a new beginning. I told you they came out and said there was nothing more they could do. That's because they did it all that they could do, and now it was up to Phoebe. Phoebe recovered. And Phoebe made it. And every time I see her, I smile because I look at her and I think Phoebe was given a new start and a new beginning. She collided, but out of the collision, she got a new beginning. Friends, very honestly, whenever you run, may you run right into him. And may you discover a new beginning that God gives to us. Some of you will run away from him. And then you're going to hit something else. Maybe it's a death. Maybe it's a sickness. Maybe it's some frightening moment. But when you hit that moment, when you have that collision, please know he is right there ready for you to meet him. Our prayer for anyone who doesn't know Jesus, our prayer that this Christmas you would collide with him and you would discover in him what so many of us have discovered, and that is this incredible relationship with the God of the universe, who would take time to come and be with us and be one of us and to know us and to love us and actually give up his life for us. So with that, I say to you, Merry Christmas. And I pray and trust that this Christmas is a Christmas where you celebrate this incredible God who was willing to leave his realm of heaven and come in and collide in our world so that we could run into him. So now as we end, I'm going to have us go join in with the live candle lighting and the singing of Silent Night. So you can see it, so you can observe it. You can sing Silent Night along with the whole rest of the church family. And then with that, we'll say goodnight. God bless you and have a wonderful Christmas. Let's go join the candle lighting now. It's always a bit of an amazing thing to me. I've been in pastoral ministry for many years. I've been a part of a candle lighting service for all those years. And it's always amazing to me how the singing of this song seems to settle my heart. You see, it doesn't matter who you are, there are things that we bring with us tonight that are always a little unsettled. And when I hear this song and I hear you sing and I see your faces and see the candles, I'm just reminded again, God with us. Oh, how I hope you know him. Merry Christmas to you.